Okay, so for part F, last part of the question, it says sketch g minus 1 of x and include asymptotes and axes intercepts, right? So, well, first, I've brought these in from previous questions, guys. So we know the domain of g minus 1 is from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, and it's greater or equal to negative pi over 2 and less than pi over 2. And we know the range of g minus 1 is y is greater or equal to 0. That's because the domain of g is x is greater or equal to 0. So let's sketch this on the, well, let's just sketch it on the calculator to see what's happening. So I have the square root of 1 plus sine x over 1 minus sine x, and it looks something like this. But as I've said, we have restrictions on the domain, and we have restrictions on, well, the range is then y is greater or equal to 0. So it's going to go from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Now let's just do a little trace here on this graph trace, because you can move along here. Now you'll note, guys, this minimum here, this is negative pi over 2. So when x is negative pi over 2, g, or g minus 1, or the graph, whatever, is 0. And that's because if you put in negative pi over 2 into x here, what do you get? Well, you get sine of negative pi over 2, which is minus 1, and you get 1 minus 1 is 0. And you get 1 minus minus 1, which is 2, but it's going to be 0 over 2, which is 0. So that at negative pi over 2, you get a 0. And then it continues along here. Now this y-intercept is at 1, because when x is 0, g minus 1 of x is 1, if you look at it here. And then as you move along up, what happens is you don't, now just be careful, guys, your calculator doesn't deal well with asymptotes, but we have an asymptote here because it cannot reach x is pi over 2. That is because it cannot be at x is pi over 2, because if I put pi over 2 in here, I get 1 minus 1, and I end up dividing by 0. So essentially, it's just going to look like this from here to here. So let's just draw some axes first, guys, like this. Something like this. Now we're going to draw a line at pi over 2. So this is x equals pi over 2, and this is going to be an asymptote. And then here, this is going to be at negative pi over 2. So at negative pi over 2, we have a 0. So put that into the graph, and essentially, it's just going to go kind of up like that. A bit like it'll look a little bit like a quadratic from here. Obviously, it's not a quadratic, but if we just do this, and we go up like this. So sketch the graph. So I have to put in here as well, guys. This is 0. This point is 0, 1. And when he says include asymptotes and x and axes intercepts, so there it crosses the x-axis here, crosses the y-axis here, and doesn't touch this. If you really want to be clear, you say asymptote at x equals pi over 2. Don't just write, guys, pi over 2. You have to write the equation of the line, which is obviously x equals pi over 2. Okay, that's the sketch, guys, and that, I think, is the last question of the paper. So I'll see you in the next video, whatever that may be.